Hello everybody, Weegee here, and welcome to another RWBY video. Today, we will be diving into two of the songs from the recently released Volume 8 soundtrack, and analyzing their lyrics. Because as most RWBY fans know, the music in RWBY is more than just good music. It's also another medium that Rooster Teeth uses to explore the characters' personalities as well as being chock full of references, and potential foreshadowing. Before we start, I would just like to apologize for any bad singing and or lip syncing that will occur during the course of this video. And with that, let's get started. First song we will be looking at is For Every Life, which is the opening song for the volume. There are a few interesting lines in the song that we will be looking at, but first, let's start at the beginning. Okay, so here we have the first line, the first verse. The first line here is a callback to the second opening of the show, but it definitely has a lot more punch here, given the stakes of the volume. The rest of the opening seems to be the lament of the main crew for their inability to do more for the Kingdom of Atlas, ending with them acknowledging that it will take more than their naive ideals to save the world. Then we move into the pre-chorus, which goes as such. So that ends the pre-chorus. These first two lines are likely talking about the end of the volume, with Team RWBY plus Jean falling into the abyss, as well as the fall of Atlas. After all, that is what they were trying to prevent. It could also be about Penny's death. After all, that was another thing they were trying to prevent. The lines "hope has no place here, maybe the path that leads our way home will finally clear" could be talking about Atlas. After all, they were evacuating everybody, but the second line doesn't really fit with that. After all, they were going to Vacua, which isn't really anybody's home. So maybe the place they're talking about is the island that they landed on, which could be dangerous, and they would be looking for a way home. But the words "finally clear" might indicate that they will be on said island for a significant amount of time. Maybe another time skip will happen, like between Volume 3 and 4. The lines "maybe the end we tried to avoid is already here" kinda supports the Penny idea. This could be RWBY learning of her fate in Volume 9, or it could just be about the fall of Atlas. Let's move to the chorus. This is probably my favorite part of the song. It's so rock heavy, I love it. Some of these lines are fairly obvious. Some dreams will rot on vines, and some lives will end too soon are talking about the deaths of Vine and Penny. The evil is Salem, and the hero that chose the wrong side, that's Ironwood's crew. Then we have the last line, which is in reference to the ending of the volume, and Team RWBY's desire to save everybody, Atlas and Mantle. Finally, we have what is the most interesting line in the chorus: some roses will never bloom. Now this could be talking about RWBY falling into the abyss, but never bloom seems more significant. More severe than a simple fall. No, it seems more like death, or at least a significant injury. Now I doubt that they will kill RWBY, not yet at least. So this could be in reference to RWBY's mother. Maybe we will get more about Summer in this coming volume. After all, there is a theory going around that the island is an afterlife of sorts, or that we will at least see the dead in some capacity. Or maybe RWBY could be facing a severe injury in the future. Or, and this is a long shot, maybe this is some severe foreshadowing to the end of the show, and the series ends with RWBY dying to kill Salem. Or dying to kill who I personally feel like is going to be the final villain, Cinder, which is a theory for another day. With that, on to verse 2. first two lines are not so subtle references to the previous volume's opening, which was called Trust Lev. It has such lines as, "Spread your wings and fly away from here," and "The way's uncertain, but we're together, moving toward the light when we trust in Lev." But as we know, they weren't able to do that in this volume. They weren't able to overcome the fear that spread through Atlas, and hate consumed Lev. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure what the final two lines here could mean, outside of Team RWBY once again lamenting their failures to save everybody in Volume 8. Unless the show gets super dark in Volume 9 and we get some main character deaths. Though I suppose it could be the other half of our cast that are on their way to Vacuo going through the pain of thinking they lost their loved ones. Maybe it's from Winter's perspective. After all, she threw away her loyalty to Ironwood to try to save her family. Only for her to lose the most important person in her life, Weiss. Now onto the second pre-chorus. Our planet's torn apart. All that remains collapsed in the void. So here we have more talk about the ending, as well as a mention of the attack by Neo and Cinder, the two that caused Team RWBY's plan to fall apart and lead to their fall into the abyss. Then we have the line, "An endless sea of broken hearts." That could be alluding to the flood that overtakes Atlas as it falls, or it could even be talking about the island that they landed on. It is surrounded by water. And if said island does have some connection to the afterlife, what causes more broken hearts than the deaths of a loved one? Finally, we get another interesting line in, "The end of a tale is worse than he feared." And again, while things did go sideways, it didn't end that badly. After all, they saved most people from Atlas. This could, of course, again be from the perspective of the characters who did go through the portal. It could also be something much simpler and just be talking about the death of Penny and the fall of Atlas. We get the chorus again, the ending tying into the bridge. And we'll get back to that epic guitar solo. But let's examine these lines. Let's start with the first two lines here, as they were the ones that stumped me the longest. "Fight for everything we loved, for all we've ever known, maybe it's just a fantasy, a foolish dream we can't achieve." What goal could they be talking about? At first, I thought it could be saving Atlas, but while they didn't save the kingdom itself, they did save the citizens. So I don't think it's just that. No, I think it's talking about something more personal, and maybe less literal, like their optimism and their naivete. After all, in this volume we had a conflict between two sides where neither were necessarily wrong. The fantasy in this context, I think, is the naive notion that given the right circumstances that humanity could overcome their differences to combat a common enemy. That people wouldn't let their fear control them. Fear, which is a pretty common theme throughout this arc. A fantasy that was crushed, and the goal mentioned could be to save everybody no matter their differences. But as we saw in the volume, they failed, with some people being too far gone, like Ironwood, or just being outright killed, like Vine and Penny. The next line talks about the fall again, as well as the destruction of the pathway they create after Cinder uses the staff. Finally, in the last line of this part, we get a reference to Volume 1's opening, "This'll be the day." The last line goes like this, "Will this be the day that we've always feared?" Though this line has much more bleak implications here, with how many people died in this volume. And it ends with some of our heroes falling into the abyss, as well as the fall of Atlas. We get the chorus one last time and then the song ends. So let's listen to the song. Let's finish this song. I love this. Actually, this is my I love instrumental stuff, so this is great. I'm much more of an instrument guy than a singer guy. I completely forgot the words for a second. Oh, I love the drum. I love that drum ending. Oh, it's so good. Overall, this song is about the failures of our heroes, and the deaths that the conflict between RWBY and Ironwood's group caused, the deaths that could have been avoided, had the two groups been able to come to an agreement, as well as the fate that befell our heroes after the collapse of their plan to save the citizens of Atlas and Mantle. This opening is one of the bleakest openings that we've had since Volume 3, and I absolutely love it. Well, that's one down, let's move on to the next, which is The Sky Is Falling, which plays during the scene where Oscar is kidnapped. Let me set that up real quick. And let's start the song, starting with the opening. I can see myself headbanging in this one. With this hair. Could work too. First line here is likely talking about the Grimhound, given how the characters and the audience reacted to it when it talked, and transformed before their eyes. It was like something out of a nightmare, or a fever dream. After all, Grim can't talk. The scream could be talking about the scream the Grim lets out in the chase, a scream that attracts other Grim, or it could be talking about the unearthly scream that Salem lets out in the finale after she comes back to life. The final line seems like a reference to both Red Like Roses Part 2 and I'm Not Ready, both of which have lines about nightmares becoming reality. A world's lost without a soul? That is a really weird line. What could it be talking about? The soul of Remnant? Maybe the gods? After all, they created the world. It could have something to do with the promise the gods mentioned in Volume 6, when they talked about bringing the artifacts together with Ozma, that if humanity proved themselves worthy, the gods would come back, and if they weren't, they would be eradicated. The next line is about losing control and getting farther away. Maybe it means getting farther away from the survival of humanity? The next line might be more literal, and refer to the torture that Oscar suffers at the hands of Salem's crew. The final line is just talking about the race to recover Oscar, I believe. Or it could even be the race for the artifacts, which they lose, with Salem having both the lamp and the staff at the end of the volume. Okay, I'm doing it now. Cover my eyes. Sorry for bad singing. There are two possible things that the line "the sky is falling" could be referring to. It could be in reference to the Greek titan Atlas, who holds up the sky, as Atlas is a floating city, one that falls in the season finale of the volume. Or it could be in reference to the fairy tale Henry Penny, or more commonly known as Chicken Little. While there are several different versions of this fairy tale, the general gist of all of them is something falls on Chicken Little's head, which leads to him believing the sky is falling, which in turn leads him to telling a lot of other people, whipping them all up into a hysteria, to either run or tell the king, depending on which story you are reading. So basically, their actions are based on fear, which leads them to making a decision that gets them killed. Does that sound familiar? It should, it's Ironwood. His fear of Salem leads him to try and sacrifice Mantle to save Atlas. He even whips other people into hysteria with him in the Aesops, but much like in the fairy tale, he is deceived by a fox, Watts, and Atlas falls and he dies, along with a couple members of the Aesops. The line "can't outrun the ruin of our lives" supports this idea, even more. As in the story of Chicken Little, one of the common conclusions is to try to just run away from it. Which, in essence, is what Ironwood's plan is. He wanted to use the staff to raise Atlas into the sky out of harm's way. He wanted to run away. This also fits in with the fairy tale motif that the show follows. Alright, now let's move on to the next section. First line could either be talking about the curse that the gods placed on Salem to never die, or the curse placed on Ozma's soul to be transferred from host to host until he kills Salem. Given the scene that this song plays during is a scene with Oscar, who is the current bearer of the Ozma soul, it's most likely the latter. The line, "A path with no escape," supports this, as Salem can't be killed, so the cycle will never end. We also get a mention of an internal enemy, which, well, that's obviously Salem, an enemy that cannot die. These lines may also give us a look into how Oscar feels about this whole reincarnation thing. Next up, we have the second pre-chorus. The first line might have more of a psychological meaning behind it, as from the sound of it, it might be talking about the mental toll that this war has taken on our protagonist. They are falling further down the hole known as despair. The constant failures and deaths weigh heavily on them, making them feel helpless. The lines "failed to stem" and "floodgates" are most likely referencing the fall of Atlas. After all, when Atlas falls, it is flooded, and the pain is being unable to do anything to stop the fall. Alternatively, it could be talking about the Grim River that Ren and the others find on their way back from failing to save Oscar. I think a tide of pain is a pretty accurate descriptor for a river that literally spawns Grim. The final line of the pre-chorus is another reference to the end of the volume, with Salem's side winning, both getting the relics and causing the fall of Atlas. The sin they are talking to might be alluding to the deadly sin of wrath. It was Ironwood's rage that helped seal the fall of Atlas, after all, and the death of characters like Penny and Vine. We get the chorus again, that leads us into the next section, which is the bridge performed by Lamar Hall. And rap section.
Watch my life flash by in scenes, and it seems there's no soul on the video screen, but I'm green trying to figure out what all of it means. Staring at the casket, hoping to move past it, knowing things will never be the same, and that's it. Clothes soaked as I stand in the rain, feeling nothing but pain until I see you again. Feel the waves crash loud and hard, oh God, lost control, I think I'm gonna lose it. All my sanity's slipping away, oh Lord, press record, I die without the music. Each breath is closer to my death, except that which is this life is none left. Let my demons live on through my legacy, study my pedigree, I need therapy.
Love that line so much. It's the most relatable line RWBY has ever. This whole section seems to be about Oscar's feelings on becoming one with Ozpin, his fear of no longer being himself after the melding. Why do I think this? Well, let's start with the line, "Lost all my hopes and dreams." When Ozpin's soul invaded Oscar, whatever his dreams had been before were gone. He had been chosen for something bigger. The next two lines might hint at what it's like for Oscar when Ozpin takes over. It's like watching his life, his body on a screen, but without his soul. The line further down, "Oh God, lost control," also supports this idea, that Oscar feels a loss of control whenever Ozpin takes over his body. Skip down a couple lines, and we have this, "knowing things will never be the same." This is Oscar acknowledging that whatever his life was before Ozpin, it can no longer be that. His life has been changed for better or for worse. Moving on, we have the lyrics, "Each breath is closer to my death, except which is this life there is none left." At first, it just seems like a pretty generic line about death, until you stop to think about Oscar and Ozpin's conversation in Volume 8, about their souls melding together, and about how neither wants that. They're both afraid of losing what makes each of them, well, them. So I think the death in this case is less physical and more spiritual or psychological. The second half at first confused me, but then it hit me. It literally means that there is no death to be had in this life, referring to Ozma's eternal rebirth. Next we have the lyrics, "Let my demons live on, through my legacy, study my pedigree." The legacy in question is definitely talking about the many souls that have been merged through Ozma's curse. The demons could be his battle with Salem, or maybe even his internal demons, such as his regrets. In Volume 3, he does mention making more mistakes and having more regrets than any man, woman, or child. So maybe it's these regrets that haunt him from host to host. These mistakes he has made in his war with Salem, that have likely gotten many people killed. The final line here is another reference to the lineage of souls that Ozma has moved from. The final line of this bridge is probably one of my favorite lines in any RWBY song. The line can apply to just about every character in the show, given all the shit each character has gone through both during the show, timeline, and before. The final line in this bridge is, "I need therapy," which, as I said earlier, is just like the best line ever. We get the chorus one final time and the song ends. But first, more instrumental stuff. Man, it was really, Jeff Williams really shredding that guitar. This hat is hot, holy shit. This song is another very bleak song, being split between Oscar's lament about the possibilities of losing his individuality, of him just becoming another soul taken by the curse placed on Ozma against his will, and the general hopeless tone of the volume. The song also sounds great. I'm always a fan of the more rock-heavy songs. Overall, another great RWBY song. And that is the lyric analysis of The Sky is Falling and For Every Life. What'd you think? Do you agree with any of my analysis? If you do, or don't, leave a comment below. And if you liked the video, give a like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for watching. Weegee out.